this is always, or has become our lovely little segue in our LBD to bring you here just for the yarn about general things. We're all in the industry, need to keep working at it. I haven't known it as tough as it is in the last 18 months. It's been, I'm bringing this is 40 years for me, and it is awfully tricky out there with this. But in the end, the same issues keep arising, and we're dealing with human beings. Just listen to a comment here, the only constant we're sure of is change, changing their minds, changing their relationships, changing their business partnerships, changing everything. People die, they hate their wives or husbands, and they have children, and things happen, and this is a constant. So we have to get used to this. The fact that 1 in 5 Aucklanders last year sold their house for less than they paid for it is a new thing across the board. It's not particularly elsewhere in New Zealand, but it may well come that way. And we don't know what's happening in this very awkward world that we live in. Are we going to become more popular, a go-to area? We don't know. What we do know is that plenty of people have to sell their houses because of personal circumstances or financial matters. And we need to come up with the dialogues and the scripts and the words and the understanding that we can empower people to make decisions and feel okay about it. I did an auction the other week where I watched the two parties at the end, the buyer and the seller, and neither of them were happy. And I thought to myself, someone, you've done a good job here, because you don't want either party happy, right? They're just both a little disappointed, and that's okay. Because you've been employed to sell that house. And if you sell it, someone buys it, and they're both a bit grumpy, it means the buyers pay a little bit more than they possibly wanted to, and the sellers take a little bit less than they wanted to. And it's that marvellous connection that our craft brings together in the industry. It cuts time in half, and it's getting solutions. But most of the time, our issues are with getting our sellers in line. You might say, oh, we can't find buyers and that sort of thing. You'll find buyers if your sellers are in line. So that's what we want to focus on this morning. Peter's going to run us through a slide here. He wants to be interrupted by you. He wants your questions and your poses. The coffee's still on if you want it. The bathroom's behind me. You can keep on eating and drinking if you like, but this next hour or two will be for you to get inside his head and ask him some questions, some scenarios that you've had, personal or professional, that you want to discuss in a forum like this. And let's take advantage of the knowledge that we've got here. I've also asked that Clarence and Sabina be available just to come up, and if you've got some particular points you want to pose in their direction, that would be fine as well. But I'll bring Peter up now, and he can push the buttons and run a slideshow. I will interrupt, and I'm expecting you to interrupt as well. Peter Walker. Come a bit closer if you need to.
Can you guys hear me all right?
Yep.
I've always felt obliged to say my name is Peter and I'm a workaholic.
Hello, Peter.
And
welcome.
Keep coming back.
the thing to say to you is that this is just the accumulation of 39 years of full-time selling and just trying to get better, you know. And my objective here isn't to get you to do what I do, it's to help you find your best way, your best medium of being able to be the person you want to be as an agent, being authentic. I don't think I find it interesting we're in an industry where we tell you to learn scripts and dialogues and be authentic. You've got to find your own words. And I'm basically here to try and share a few concepts, a few ideas, and trying to think differently. I think that we put a big emphasis with regard to money when it comes to real estate, but it's not just about money. It's about lifestyle, it's about time as much as anything. Especially I find myself as I'm getting older, we tend to relate to people 7 years either side of our age. I'm in my early 60s now, and I'm just finding I'm dealing with a lot more people approaching retirement, getting to an older time. And just to give you an example, I was dealing with some owners that had a fixed perception of what their home was worth, right? And on auction day, we were $40,000 apart. And I just said to Ray, who was a friend of mine, I said, Ray, how old are you? And he said, I'm 80. And I said, how many years do you reckon you got to live? And he said, 10. And seriously, I said, mate, are you kidding? I've seen you on the piss and how much you smoke. I said, if you got 5 years in you, your doctor should get a medal, you know? Anyway, I'm just saying, obviously you can't do that with a stranger, but I said to him, mate, you're going to put 5 years of your life, by the time the market turns around, which will probably be 3 or 4 years, you're going to put 30% of your life on hold for $40,000. I said, as a person who's interested in behavioural economics, I would have thought that there was more than $100,000 value in the rest of your life. Ray took that offer, moved down the coast, bought into a market which was a lot stronger, and I rang him only 2 years later and said, look, just coming back to you, it was a pretty confronting conversation we had where I talked to you about how many more years you thought you had to live. And he said, Peter, we just tell everyone how looking at it from that perspective really changed where our value was. Do you know what I mean? And I'm saying, try and find that nut, that chestnut, and try and find what it is that's really driving people. It's not always the money. Deepak Chopra, just saying here, says be detached from the outcome. So my point is, with our conversations, I think it's about through empathy and kindness. It's not about having to get the deal together. It's just being a little bit detached. Does that make sense? Being calm with your conversations, the way we deliver it. We don't want to come across as people that need a sale. We're there for them.
How brave do you have to be, Peter? We've talked about having courage in this industry. How brave do you have to be? And isn't it about timing and when you ask them the questions?
Yeah. I think with regard to educating our owners, we've got to get it right from the start. I'm not saying that we're not valuers, we're agents. We don't determine the market, we interpret it. But I always try and have dialogues with people, talking about focusing on what their motive is. And I rarely am the highest price when it comes to appraisals, but commonly I get record prices because we've learned about how it's competition that gets the best results, and it's creating that model. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That's sort of straightforward. So, Shane, please give me a question here.
Well, I always think you get permission to have those hard conversations at the start anyway.
Speak up, please.
You can be as hard as you like with those conversations. Being hard doesn't necessarily mean being mean. But you can get permission at the very start of a journey with somebody.
Yeah. And
To
Shane,
have those conversations 2 weeks down the track. You don't come in and go away from it.
well, I think if it's done through respect, I think care and kindness are very underrated tools in our conversations. Look, when I'm at my appraisals, I think this is one of the most successful lines that I've had with regard to winning business. I've said, you're going to get a number of agents out and we're all going to give you an appraisal. And interestingly, we all go off the same sales data. So it always fascinates me that you get different appraised prices. And I said, and commonly, the agents that give you the highest price are the ones with self-interest because they're actually just trying to get your signature on a contract. They're not focused on getting you the most money, they just want to make sure they get the deal. I said, to me, the agent who gives you the highest price is your enemy because they commonly deny you the opportunity to recognise a good offer when it's presented because you're thinking so much more. How often? Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Thank you. And I'm saying so commonly, and I say, isn't it funny that we're in a business where an agent will sign you up and tell you they're going to get more money than anyone else, then they spend 3 weeks telling you how you're not going to get what they told you. It's just some of those.
Back up the hearse.
Yeah. And I was saying, so often, if I'm not the last agent in, because you know how everyone wants to be the last agent, I said, can you do me a favour? And often when you know that it's an agency renowned for overpricing, I said, just before the agent says what they think your home's worth, can you say to them, oh, by the way, I just want to let you know, we're not listing with the agent who gives us the highest price. And they said, what value is that? And I said, when you see their facial expression, you'll see whether they were going to lie to you. And it's amazing how often people have rung me and said, Peter, it was so funny when Richard came out, he was about to give us a price, we said, we're not listing with the agent who gives us the highest price, and he went, oh, hang on, wait a sec. And they thought, well, why would he be changing? It was clearly because that was what the intention was, all right? So just, I think from the start, often where we have type of conversations is we don't have a more credible conversation to start with. And please, I'm not saying change what you do, I'm saying this is what I do.
Peter, a lot of the vendors want to hear that music though, they want to hear that number. And so I completely relate to what you're doing, that's my style.
Yeah.
And then if someone comes in on a one presentation and gets the business because they get, they sell them that dream.
But not all business is good business. I think that's the thing. But it's not that I'm saying be too selective. I'm just saying Aaron Davis uses the term cruel optimism, where agents give the owner of unrealistic expectations, and it's cruel because ultimately they're the ones that suffer by having additional days on the market or selling for less than they might have in that early period of time. Is that making sense?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, I talk to people about this market being like a green drought. Is anyone familiar with what a green drought is?
No.
Okay, green drought is when you've had an extended period of drought, then you get some rain, and all of a sudden it all looks green again. Look, it's commonplace in Australia, probably more so than New Zealand, but on the surface you drive through the country and everything's green, but it's a very thin layer of grass, right, or just there to start with, but there's no substance in it. There's not more rain. Everyone thinks, wow, how good is this? But it's very, very temporary. But what I'm saying is that it's a green drought because on the surface it looks like we've got good inquiry, but I say to people, our open homes at the moment are a lot like bachelor and spinsters balls. You get plenty of people there, but no one wants to make a commitment. I'm saying it's like a bachelor and spinsters ball.
Bachelor and spinsters ball.
Yeah. Everyone turns up, mate. You've got everyone there. A lot of prospects, but no one wants to make a commitment.
So,
Aaron wants to go to one.
what's the date of the next one? But is it? But a similar a note there might be when you get the odd high sale in a market.
Yes.
And all of a sudden everyone just says, right, well that's now the new market, and it's a one-off. Often purchased by an unconscious buyer.
Yeah.
Good marketing can attract someone who's not in the market, doesn't do the research, pays a premium price off the cuff.
Yeah.
And that's an example of a green drought.
Correct. The other thing too, when you get abnormally high sale price, try and look for the story. It's not uncommon, and I'm sure that there's many examples where you'll get an outlier result, and then you'll learn, for instance, there was a sale that took place in my suburb and it was well above what anyone was expecting. We realised that the person who bought it, they had a child that was very troubled, was a youth, and their only friend lived over the back fence. And that family decided that the best thing that could happen for their child was to live just behind their best friend who was on the back fence. So they just kept bidding, and the underbidder was a person that didn't know the market, and they just said, we'll just keep bidding till we buy it. So, do you know what I mean? There can be extenuating circumstances which are nothing to do with the features and inclusions of the home. Travis?
The other thing I did when I was selling, if it was an option property and if it was stream, you can go back and look at it and educate the vendor around it and just say, I noticed the option you pulled it on the market at 1.6, which is not necessarily the reserve. Those vendors were probably prepared to take possibly even less, but with competitive bidding it ended up going for 1.8. So it's that story to them as well.
Mate, and this is where I'm saying doing your homework, and that's a great thing to qualify. It's that it's not just about knowing what home's sold for. Ring up the agent if you know them. Get the story, what happened, they might tell you, and then you can explain that to people if that makes sense.
I think one story I learned a long time ago about value when someone pays a premium price is that if you have an example where, say the reserve's 1.3 and there are 3 bidders and one gets up to 1.350 and then they're out, and the next one goes 1.4 and they go on and on and on to say 1.5 and it sells. The guy buys at 1.5 145. His circumstances change, even realises he might have paid a bit over the top, says, I want to quit it. What's it worth now? Well, the guy only went to 1,495 underneath you because you were pushing him. He's now going to go $5 grand above the previous bidder, was at 1,350. So you could argue, with the reserve was 1,3, the third highest bidder was 1,350. Therefore, this bloke would have bought it at 1,355. Their sale price is 1,5. And so, you can get a massive correction on some pure, clear analysis of who was bidding, looking at a bidding sheet. Bidder number 1, 2 and 3. And so these outliers, the story is the critical part of the high price. But Peter, they do, as you said, everyone's got access to the same stats, and that becomes folklore, that price in the market, doesn't it? Everyone relies on that.
Just, I think having product knowledge is really helpful. And when I say product knowledge, you get that through asking questions. I think the best agents ask questions rather than talk too much. And finding out owners' motivation and things like that. In the instance of Ray, he wanted to move down the coast. And at 84, it made sense. Sorry, he was at 80. And at his age, time was increasingly valuable. And that's where I'm saying, for him, it ended up being in his favour that he has enjoyed 3 years down the coast rather than 3 years waiting for his home to sell. I think that with our conversations, we want to try and avoid dogma. We want to try and not be so opinion-based, asking questions, always delivering the market. And my point is, when I go into my appraisals, I really make sure that I know what I'm talking about. But more importantly, if there's a significant sale, I ring the agent, try and get the story. It's just invaluable. Also, Mark's reference to the reserve. Often your reserve is where the owners thought the value was. It's only that the auction might have achieved a result in excess of that. And you've got to say that that's a premium. You can't rely on that happening elsewhere, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Peter, one thing I sometimes say in the reserve shed, they're saying, well, that one next door sold for 1.85, mine's a better house. Then if they have that knowledge, and say, your agent told me that was 4 months ago. So would you agree it's not just about comparing house with house, it's about comparing our buyers with those buyers?
Yeah, well,
those buyers are important.
Again, I say to people that your own home is a lot like your own children. And I've said to people that I know, I said, telling someone that their home's not worth what they think is like telling them that their kids are ugly. Right? And I'm just saying that it's a tough conversation. And I commonly say, do you want me to tell you what you want to hear or what you need to know? Or what I think would be wise for you to know? I'm also just mindful that we've got to talk about a variety of things when it comes to what Mark was referring to, getting a great result and then people wanting to replicate that. It's just understanding that you've got to take into consideration market forecasts, economic predictions, also the competition, knowing that sometimes you'll have a home that gets a really good result and then all of a sudden a few of the neighbours put their houses on the market thinking they're going to get the same result, but the supply and demand curve has changed. Does that make sense? It's just explain that to people and say, well, they sold when there was only 2 homes on the market in your suburb, now you've got 7. People are being more selective, and you can't, and this is a comment that I will probably say every day, you can't quantify indecision. You can't quantify reluctance or hesitation from buyers. When we are in a tougher market and we say, the analysts say the market's come back 10%, we don't have the same number of buyers that are buying homes and offering 10% less. The consequence of having fewer buyers is that prices have come back. Does that make sense? Not everyone that walks through your home who says that they're a buyer is actually going to be a buyer.
So in a market where you do have half a dozen or 7 in the near vicinity, the smart play is a call to action, isn't it?
Yes.
To not so much force a buyer to take action, but give them the fear of missing out if they don't.
Yeah, very true. And look, I've been, same as Mark, funny enough, this is my 40th year, and I've been listing and selling pretty much other than taking a year off, been pretty much working 6 or 7 days a week. What's motivated me is that chunking, that I just get up and every day I think, I just hope I can get a little bit better today. It's amazing how that can drive you, because each day is then a fresh example and it's more of a challenge, trying to get better at things that we're doing. And just the practicalities of conversation. I was just talking last night about talking to buyers, and you know, when people say, how much is this home going to go for? Trying to avoid that model of giving them a really low price. So when I meet people or someone rings me and says, what's that home going to go for? And I said, well look, I'm not too sure. What I can tell you is that there's two values. There's market value and there's opportunity. I would think an analytical assessment of this home would be 1.3 plus, but I think the opportunity probably exists anywhere around 1.2. Maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less. So do you understand what I'm saying? We're talking market value versus opportunity. It's just trying to be credible. And then you get people who will say, well, we really like it, what do we do at auction? And then you have those different conversations. I don't want to complicate it, but I'm just saying, being real with these conversations. If you come to one of my open homes, I will give you a list of past sales, I'll give you a list of answers to commonly asked questions, and they'll say, what's the pitch price? And I will say to people, do you want the low price that gets you all excited, or the real price that you can rely on for making informed decisions? Do you know I've got a 100% success rate of people wanting to know the real number rather than the underquote? And with regard to that, so they'll come and say, what do you think? I said, have you had a look at the sales? Do you know are you familiar with the area? And I always say, volunteered interest has been, some have been saying the 1.1's moving into the 1.2's. I think market value's above that, but I said the owner is a genuine seller, and I think that's where the opportunity lies. Does that sound credible to you?
Of course it does.
Right? So it's about having these real conversations, but I'm not saying say what I say, I'm saying formulate and create what you feel comfortable saying and how you feel doing it. It's amazing how people notice the difference.
When do you like having those conversations?
Which ones?
With the ones with the buyers when they're talking to you?
Preferably over the phone after the open home.
What about at the open home? If you've got time, if there's not, if you have them there.
And look, you know, sometimes it's saying to people, they say, look, we're not too sure what to do. And I said, often the reason why an auction gets a bad name is that we don't prepare people. We don't prepare the owners nor the buyers for necessarily what's going to happen, right? I'm saying with the underquoting model, and we say, oh, we're thinking 1.1 plus, and we know deep down that the value's around 1.25, 1.3. Having those conversations, say, Mark, I know that you've expressed interest in the home. I just want to say you've said to me that you've got interest in the 1.1s. I think there's probably going to be too much competition around that to suggest that you can rely on buying it for that. Does that make sense? I think there's probably going to be too much competition. But Mark, if there isn't, you're going to be in the box seat. But all I'm saying is that if you're going to have a fight on your hands, be prepared. Be prepared. Have those conversations with your wife, partner before the auction as to where you see value, where you're prepared to go to, so you're not putting yourself under undue pressure under auction conditions. Shane?
How would you have that conversation if you're in Queensland?
I'd have to raise my voice?
Yeah, where you can't put your price at all, where it's just basically you're telling a story and getting them based on getting them to an auction. So obviously in Victoria we've got to give them a range, correct?
Yeah. Well, mate, the problem with Victoria, there's people are still quoting 100,000 or 200,000 under what they think.
Yeah. So let's that same property improvement, if you were in Queensland and you weren't allowed to put your price, how would you have that conversation with Mark?
So, well, Mark, where do you see? I haven't worked in Queensland, so
I'm just
to give to put them on the spot and say, have you got any thoughts on where you think the value is? And he might say, well, not really. So, okay, well, past sales have been this. I think there's a suggestion of that. How do you think this home compares with these ones? Trying to get them to come up with the answer. That would be what I would think.
Yeah.
Would you still approach that in the same way, given the green drought conditions you alluded to?
Yes.
My experience with buyers in the green drought is the moment you start indicating value, at probably a market value based on historic sales, that buyer goes and follows the property, which there's no price signal or a strong motivation for an agent who's underquoted.
Yeah. Hey, that raised a really good point. I know that underquoting is, frowned upon, but I'll tell you what, it's not as bad as overquoting. And I say that to people, I say, underquoting is a problem, but I said it's nowhere near as big a problem as overquoting. And as critical as people are when I underquote, let me tell you, they're nowhere near as passionate as the conversations with people where I've sold it for less than where I've thought. And look, no system is going to be perfect, I want to say that. And also, if you're competing, like we've got one of the agents in our area who underquotes considerably, and he's just building more and more of a reputation to not be trusted, right?
Yes.
Okay, and he will probably become a sales manager in a year and say what a success he was for 3. I mean, Casanova didn't get his reputation from having one bomb, did he? You know what I mean? I'm just saying it's about building a track record of success, and my point is you've got to understand that. So you've got to be prepared, and I've said, look, if you're going through other homes, be prepared that those other agents are renowned for giving prices which are well below what their owners' expectations are. So, no system's going to be foolproof. Wayne?
Yeah, paradoxically, Peter, we hear whispers here, and I'm not sure how true they are, of maybe Victoria implementing a stance that you have to declare the reserve price a week prior to the auction, or 2 weeks prior to the auction.
Well, the thing with that is that people can always change their mind.
Yeah.
So,
is that a crime?
No. I'm making the point
sign of strength, isn't
the
it?
big thing I'm hearing, Wayne, still talk to people that go down to Victoria is that they're getting grossly underquoted still. So, a lot of these regulators try and bring in these systems, but I don't think people should have to declare the reserve. Buyers don't ever have to declare what price they're really prepared to pay. They only tell you afterwards when they get it for less. When they pay too much, oh no, we changed our mind. Oh yeah, we picked that for 50 grand less than we're going to. Okay, this is where we're getting, so I'm saying this is where we're talking about the auctioneers now. Okay, you're an auctioneer coming into a pre-auction meeting. One of the things that I will say most commonly to people is I introduce myself, I say, hi, I'm Peter Walker, I'll be your auctioneer, and I appreciate the fact that you've only just met me. I don't want to be here telling you you're not going to get what you want, or not telling you to make huge decisions based on me walking through your home over the last 5 minutes. Okay? Commonly, that builds a level of trust in the form of people knowing I'm not going to be making sweeping statements. How often do you hear someone say, well, that's fine, but I don't have to sell at auction?
Regularly.
Yeah. So let's imagine the scenario where we've got a home that's worth, we've appraised at 1.2 to 1.3, they want 1.35, and I will say, Nathan, I understand that you don't need to sell, and I respect that entirely. However, between now and auction, if you decide that you do want to sell, please get comfortable with numbers in the 1.1s leading into the 1.2s rather than 1.3.
Get comfortable with the numbers.
Yeah, get comfortable. So we're not saying you've got to get comfortable. We're just saying try and get comfortable with these numbers. And most commonly, look, it's letting people make their decisions their way, not telling them. You know, one of my favourite sayings is don't tell me, show me.
Do you call your own auction?
Yeah, when Mark or someone decent isn't around, I Mark and I have called 30 auctions together. We've sold 27 under the hammer. The other 2 or 3 tend to not have any bidders. But it's the same thing. It's just that when we go into the meetings, we get each other. No one tries to dominate the conversation. They meet Mark for the first time. Mark eases into conversations where he makes comments, isn't it?
Well, yeah, I mean, you've got to find a common interest or whatever. If you just want to go in hard and talk about the sale process, then you know, I tend to be very complimentary to the owner about their choice of agents. It's quite a good thing. I commend you on being clever enough to choose such and such to run your campaign. That's always guarantees you another phone call, another booking later on. But you need to find your own wavelength with the seller, and where they're at, whether there's a common interest you've got, or you know, whether it's children, or whether it's cricket, or whether it's a horse racing photo on the wall or something. That's how it tends to be. You build your own relationship. But look, none of the sellers have missed the fact that the economy's screwed, the world's under pressure, and interest rates are, who knows where they're going. They haven't missed any of that. So none of this information you're giving them is a real surprise to them. Yes, they're potentially a bit disappointed, but if you're not honest, you're only delaying the conversation that has to happen at some time. And that's why I say to some agents, let the yellow team take the listing. Let them have it. Wait till they muck it up, and then you come in. Just keep in touch with the owner. Tell them not to list it for more than 6 weeks, and you can get it when they muck it up. If they're insistent on running with another company, you know, it's about making judgment calls, whether the owners are serious about selling or not.
Look, I don't know if you have it over here, but in Australia, or in Canberra, we have people that commonly want more for their home than it's worth.
Kiwis are not like that.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Okay.
They give it away.
I've got a comment there, expose a weakness to reveal strength. Does anyone know what I'm talking about there?
Vulnerability.
Yeah, just being real. And, you know, just saying to people when we're talking about sales, they'll say the market's a bit all over the place. I said, I don't think the market's all over the place. I said, I think it's about the standard of the agent and often the auctioneer, just the way it's unfolded. And I said, don't get me wrong, I've certainly made mistakes, and I will talk about a property I had at 13 Packer Street. I appraised it 1.6 to 1.65. Other agents said 1.7, so I thought I've been fairly credible, got an offer at 1.6. And because I had other interest, I thought we'll run to auction. So, we talk about the value of not underquoting, or the cost of not underquoting. Those people that were coming along would have owned it at 1.6, so I thought we've got a sale here. They ring me 2 days early and say, we found a property which we like just as much, and the agents told us we can get it for 1.5. So we're not going to your auction, we're going to wait for it. Okay? Tried to have a discussion, but it was too late. My point is, it's just being real. When people said, why hasn't it sold? I said, I think it's agent error. And this is 2 weeks ago. I said I had interest at 1.6, I didn't convert it like I could have, and now here we are at 1.5. And we sold that property for 1.425, sorry, so 175 under what we could have potentially got beforehand. But it's just being real and owning it. And you could say, well, why do you want people to think that that might happen to them? Just saying it's about exposing that weakness to reveal a strength that you're a credible person. Now, again, I don't know if it's like it over here, but we have a lot of people that do want to deal with legitimate, genuine people. Okay, just a thought.
I used a line the other day when I was doing a negotiating off the floor, and I wasn't getting there. I could see I wasn't going to make it, and I said to the owners, look, you might not believe this, but I used to be really good at this job. and I went back out to talk to the buyer one more time, and came back in with a small, you know, it was about 80 grand away, so I came back in with like 5 more grand, and they said, look, we've decided that we think we should sell it,
yeah. Guilted them into it.
And it was, a self-deprecating humour is always, if there's, you just want the owners to have a few smarts about them. It makes it a lot easier. But anyway, that was just a very recent, revealing a weakness, exposing a weakness to reveal a strength.
Yeah. Can I always, and I mean always, talk to people about how it's a team thing, that we have to work as a team. I always, and I say always, talk about Darwin saying that survival of the species belongs to the most adaptable and collaborative. So I always make sure that my owners feel a part of it. ring them each day, ask them for feedback, how they're going, what they're thinking, give them, and I said, look, I've got someone who's advised of interest in the 1.1s. I'm not asking you to accept it, I'm just saying be prepared for auction day. So again, what I'm trying to talk to you about is having conversations where people feel that they're still in charge, not saying, I've got an offer of 1.1, what do you want me to do? I work in an office where there's an agent, I always look at his appraisals, and he delivers pre-auction listed offers 20 to 30% under what he's appraised it at. And I hear him talk to people, and he says, I've got an offer of 1.45 on your property. I said, but you appraised it at 1.7. He said, yeah, but this is the market, what do you want me to do? And he likes the fact that these people don't sleep well at night. He likes the fact that they're anxious. I'm just saying, I don't think it's a current model.
Really enjoyed your perspective, Peter, thank you. We're talking quite a lot about involvement as the auctioneer and obviously before auction. What experiences and tips can you give us to help coach the salespeople that we work with so that we're not the only messengers of truth?
I think that it's with the people that you deal with, asking lots of questions of the agent. Where did you appraise it? Like when I'm the auctioneer, so I do call auctions for some of our staff, I say, where's the interest? Ask them that first. And I say, where did you appraise it? And they tell me, oh, I can't remember. I say, well, I can look in Google Drive and find out where it is, so don't worry about that. But they commonly tell me that's where they appraise it. And I say, well, what have you said to them about that? And when there's a bit of a gap, I say to people that the difference between your pitch price to your buyers and the appraised price to your owners is your zone of lost credibility. Come auction, if you told them 1.7 but you pitched it at 1.4 to 1.5, you've got a $200,000 gap there. Try and make that gap as narrow as you can. Does that make sense? It's just about being credible. If we're fundamentally going to have one bidder auctions, prepare yourself for conversations where they're not going to think you're an arsehole. It's about trust. Saying to people, Greer, I know that you have an interest and you've been expressing interest around about 1.4, 1.5. My expectation is the owner may want a little bit more, but on auction day, where's grandchild? Thanks, Grant. I've worn out that line you've taught me. On auction day, the owners are in decision mode, not deliberation mode. That is one of the most powerful lines, Grant. I always saw Sue teaches me those things. Hey, I want to talk to you about a few things. Homes are sold in competition, not in isolation. Third-party people are always well-meaning but rarely well-informed. Does that make sense? Yeah. And they say, oh, we had our friends over and they think it's worth 1.7. I said I would get that, and if I was one of your friends, I'd tell you that as well. But ask them how many people will sign a contract, and without trying to be smart, are they aware of the other properties in the marketplace? Because I said if your home was the only one on the market, it would probably get 1.7. But with 5 or 6 other properties on the market, there's competition, it's unlikely to get that. Buyers aren't seeing value at those
numbers. Same as a valuation. We've had a valuation.
Yeah.
Did the valuer attach a 10% check to the evaluation? No. One
I tell you a true story. In a townhouse complex,
Showing your age now.
I had a property on the market, and this neighbour was the expert, and he kept telling people how their home's worth so much more, right? And
is he trying to boost his own value?
Well, most friends, neighbours, give them a price relative to what they think their home's worth. It's actually not necessarily what they think it's worth, but what they want. When they say, my friends think it's worth a lot more, and I said that's true because they're substantiating why they think their $1.5 million home is worth 2. It's a relativity of comparison, right? But I was talking to them, and they said, oh no, John's told us that our home's worth $850 when all the interest was in the high 7s. I said, okay, can you do me a favour? Tell John the open home is 11 o'clock to 11:30 on Saturday. I'll see him down there and he can teach me how he's going to talk to buyers. John rings me. Mate, I'm not coming to your open home. I said, why not? He said, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm not a real estate agent. I said, well, stop telling my owner what you think his home's worth unless you're going to bid at auction, unless you're going to produce a buy. let me do my job. Now, it's an extreme situation, but I'm just saying, let's make these people more accountable.
But how often is feedback swayed by an agent saying to a buyer where they think it is, and they go, yeah, we think it's worth that as well, because they've had a number thrown at them by the agent. Then it goes in the report, buyer thinks it's worth such and such. Well, no, buyer agreed with my underquoting scenario that I exposed.
And a lot of agents don't deliver the market, they deliver the market that they create by way of underquoting. And look, we're in a market that's, if it's devoid of confidence and competition, we're anchoring people on lower numbers. We're talking them down, okay? And again, we're trying to present value and get a balancing act. I'm not trying to be righteous here, but I'm saying we've got to be careful with our words and our representation. So when people say to me, what do you think it's worth? I said, what I think it's worth is irrelevant. I won't be bidding at the auction, but what I can tell you is the people that have expressed genuine interest have been saying in the high sevens. Now, whether that's what they're really thinking or not, I don't know. It's best that you come to the auction. But what I do know is that the owner has a legitimate intention to sell.
See, Peter, you're talking about appraisals, and when agents are telling me, oh, this is in line with our appraisal, and I say, well, that's a miracle.
Yeah.
It's as rare as a hen's tooth that the agents get the appraisals right.
Yeah.
Nowadays in our market, it's very hard to nail and if it happens to coincide with the appraisal, it's often more by chance.
Yeah.
So you have to be a bit careful there.
Now, I haven't given out any handouts because I know that if I give you handouts, you tend to tune out and think, oh, I can always refer to the notes. If you've got any writing capacity or anything like that, just want to say there's a few things that I talk about, concepts that I talk about in negotiations. One is about how in a softening market, buyers and sellers are looking at different things. Sellers are looking in the rear view mirror at where the market's been, but buyers are looking in the windscreen at where the market's going. And they can be quite different scenarios. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Very powerful how people can relate to that. And that's the thing, having discussions where people can relate to what you're saying. So in a negotiation, Ben, I'll say to people, I've got a reserve at 1.2, I've got an offer on the floor at 1.15, and I'll say, Ben, there's always two buyers on a property. There's the buyer out there who wants to pay you 1.15, and the buyer in here who's wanting to buy it back from the market at 1.2. And often when they don't understand, they say, who's that buyer at 1.2? And I said, you. Right? And it's just about, when you think about it, so when I talk to people, Karen, about the market and they say, oh, this is ridiculous, we're not going to take 1.15, we're not going to take 1.2, I say, don't think about 1.15 or 1.2, think about the gap between what that amount is being offered and what you're willing to accept. All of my dialogue is about having them own the decision, always being in control. And they say, well, what do you mean? I said, well, we've got interest at 1.15 to 1.2, and whatever you want above 1.2 is that gap that we've got to try and bridge. Obviously, the lesser it is, the easier it is to bridge. But I said, look at it in those terms. And then if you break it into statistics or percentages, and say, we're only 1 or 2% away from a deal here. It's amazing how they can be more engaged in trying to negotiate than if they're thinking of $100,000. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
We're only 5 or 7% away from a deal. Those smaller numbers can be compelling. Does that make sense now? Go. Avoid opinion-based dialogue. So I'm making the point, deliver the market. Saying, Shane, volunteered interest has been in the 1.1s. We've got a lot of people that love to pay in the 1.1, so I'm not selling for that. That's fine. But I said, let's see what happens when we bring them all together. Recent sales and competing listings. That's why I'm a workaholic. You've got to be if you want to be good at it. You've got to know your stock. You've got to know your buyers.
Also the buyers now, you've got to know them. The number of times that agents ring me on the morning of an auction and say, oh, Jim's out. And I say, no, Jim was never in.
Yeah.
And that's because they haven't got inside their buyer, found out what's, spinning their wheels, what they have for breakfast. They're meeting with them a couple of days out to discuss bidding strategy, things like that. To get commitment from them, to get involved as an agent.
That's a great. Look, I'm hoping this makes sense, and I apologise if it's not. Okay. You've been good enough to come down here, and I want to say one of the big things that I focus on is saying, for me, buyers are out until they're in.
Yes.
A lot of my competition, I've got 5 or 6 interested buyers.
No.
Again, I say, it's like dating apps. That you might think that you've got all this interest, but and I want to lead into. I'll come back to you with that. My Halle Berry story about buyers, right? And I say, it's like, and yeah, this is not a inappropriate conversation, mate.
That's fine.
No, but I just want to be very credible with you and say, it's like I say, open homes at the moment are a little bit like going to a nightclub, right? And I said, on the surface you think you've got interest, but it's not. It's the questions that you ask that will determine the degree of credibility and interest, right? And I said, it's like meeting Halle Berry at a nightclub. And you'll say, Halle, what's your favourite cuisine? And she might say, I really like Italian. Okay, what's your favourite movie? Oh, I love watching Monsters Ball. And she'll say, and you think, yeah, and you're chatting, you think, isn't this really good? Here's a really good prospect. Halle, you're interested in coming to an Italian restaurant with me and going to a movie later? No, I'm not. It all comes down to the questions you ask. Do you know what I mean? And I'm saying, in that instance, you might think that you've got interest, but you don't really. So it's qualifying and saying, do you have an interest in the home? Yes, I do. Are you interested enough to come to the auction? I'm not sure. Have you seen anything else that you've liked in comparison? You might find that you've got people that like it, but like Halle Berry, they like other people more. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's just finding out about that.
I think agents are so happy, they're just trying to please people, aren't they? They're trying to please them by saying, I've got 3 or 4 interested parties, when in fact one's absolutely fine. But they just set everyone up for disappointment.
That's
in
absolutely
those
right,
days.
Mark. It's hopeless.
And I sit in the reserve and say, well, yes, you had 3 or 4 on Monday, on Wednesday we got 1, but I said, hang on, let's rewind 3 weeks. You had no one at the start. So let's have some context here that one's really good.
Or even worse, you've got a buyer who's told the agent, oh, we've got a budget up for 1.6. And so they pass that to the owner, buyer with a budget up for 1.6. You're negotiating with the buyer, clearly has more money, and they make it very clear they're negotiating on another property as well, and they certainly wouldn't pay any more than 350, otherwise they'd rather go buy something else.
Yeah.
Peter, when are buyers most honest? I mean, what if they're not? If they say, look, we're not coming to buy your property.
Yep.
Is that the time to ask them what they think it's worth? Is that opinion valuable at that stage?
Yeah, I think it is. But I want to come back and say, I don't believe that buyers are liars. I think they're just prone to changing their mind. And if we can create favourable circumstances, they're more likely to change their mind for the better, rather than if we create unfavourable circumstances at auctions, they can then go the other way. If you haven't read the book 6 Principles of Influence by Robert Cialdini, I think it is, very good book, and one of those things is about social proof. Auctions are all about social proof. It's not uncommon for someone to be thinking 1.4 that comes to an auction, and there's one person at 1.1, won't go anymore, all of a sudden their 1.4 bid they're going to make is now down at 1.2 because they're thinking they were going to pay too much. Make sense? And just trying to navigate that. So look, this is what I'm about to say. You've got to be careful, but I would actually prefer to have one really good buyer than one really good buyer and 2, 3 really soft buyers.
In this market, yeah.
Yeah, in this market. And all my conversations about in this market, and I'm just saying, look, this is not, it's a case-by-case example. There's not a common rule, but if I've got someone who I know is thinking a number that the owner's going to accept, there's the opportunity in this market to sell it prior to. Don't rule it out if it's a softening market. But also, I've said to buyers, I've said, Mark, look, I appreciate you have interest around 1.1, 1.15. Given the market, what feedback is, what the owner's expecting, I can't look them in the eye and say that they should accept your offer. If if you're the highest bidder. So I'm saying, if you're limited to thinking that your interest is only up to 1.15, it's probably best that I say, let me keep my credibility and you come to another auction. Okay? Now, I'm not saying you do it with all of them, I'm saying you've got to read the room. That's where we make our money, by reading the room, reading people. But I don't want Mark to come along if he's thinking he's going to get it for 1.15 when I know my owner's not going to take it, and that I've got interest around 1.3, because I don't want him to say at 1.15, well, Peter, I told you that's all I was willing to pay and you told me to come along, or anything like that, because you can't negotiate with the other people. Again, every situation is different, so I'm just giving you an example.
I remember taking an offer to a guy who was a secondary school principal. This would be way back, late 80s, and I took him an offer, and he was an old guy, and it was well below what he wanted. We were out on our feet. It was, that 87 time or 88 when the market was toast. And I took him this offer, and you know what he said to me? He said, look, Mark, this guy's got the cash, and we need it. And he summed it up really quickly. It was a bad offer, but it was clean. And as I say to people when they are making offers, there's no such thing as a bad cash offer. It only needs one change, right? One change, nothing else. Just cross that number out, put your number in. And if you cross it out, you might lose it. And this guy, he was smart enough. He's an old guy. He's got the cash, and we need it.
Can I quickly ask the slightly lower bidders? Do they not help the process of maybe shifting the vendor back to a realistic market level? Are they not part of that picture?
Social proof?
Yeah, they are, and again, I'm just making the point, if you tell the owners, but also the best relationships are built on trust. So my point is, I find that if you give a credible appraisal to start with, and the interest is sort of where you predict, you've got a lot more trust than if you've told them 1.7 and then you're delivering interest at 1.3, 1.4. Okay, so I actually do the pre-auction meeting where you talk about what you think is going to happen on auction day. I tend to have that about 2 weeks out, two or 2.5 weeks before the auction day, and they say, why are you having this meeting now? I said, I want you to get comfortable with what's likely to happen rather than have a sleepless night before the auction.
Vendors could be an interesting animal, and they can lift that reserve up. They can make a last minute decision to push, take that uncle's advice.
Yes.
So that's, those slightly lesser buyers sometimes can help, but I understand what you're saying.
And also, when those say, oh, our uncle, he used to be in real estate, he thinks it's worth a lot more, say, can you ring him and ask him to come to the auction because I might be able to learn from him.
I sell to him.
But I mean that, it's just the, it's also, okay, I had a situation, elderly couple, and they were playing pretty hard on price, Vincent, and I said, they kept saying to me, we don't need to sell at auction. I said, okay, I said, if we don't sell at auction, which I'm fine with, it's likely that you're going to have, if we reach an agreement, about 14 to 21 days before we get an exchange contract. Are you comfortable with that? Oh, well, not really. I said, well, okay. All I want to ask is, what value do you put on a good night's sleep? Because if we don't sell at auction, and we do reach an agreement the day after, every chance you're going to have 14 to 21 sleepless nights. And I want you to factor that in. What value do you put on certainty moving forward? What value do you put on peace of mind, knowing that you've got to sell? And I said, surely there's got to be some value, even if it's only $1,000 or $2,000. Make a decision prepared for factoring that in now rather than after auction. I just always say to people, the worst situations where I finish an auction and then an hour later they say, oh, we would have taken that price. I said, that's all I'm trying to avoid. Does that make sense? With regard to health and well-being, and okay, negotiating, it's not uncommon, Jordan, to say to someone, the funny thing about a softening market is that people often think that their prospects are going to get better. I said in a softening market, it's highly unlikely that the opposite's going to happen. And it's just explaining it to them and letting them own the decision. So we're not saying, do this, do that, just saying, please factor that in. Please take that into consideration. Do you guys often, when talking to people, I will say, Aaron, it's funny, I've got an offer at 2.2 today, and I know that you're after 2.4, but it's so interesting for me how in this market, the owners on auction day, what they think is a disappointing price, in 2 weeks' time, they find to be a great price and they're so thrilled that they accepted the offer. So when I sell a property at auction, like I did in December, the people wanted 2.35 and they accepted 2.2 because they had to sell, and they said, Peter, we just want to let you know we're really disappointed. And I said, I just want to let you know I'm disappointed that you're disappointed. Rang them on the Tuesday, because neighbours were ringing me saying, how much did you get for that? I said 2.21. They said, you're kidding me. How did you get over 2? I rang them on the Tuesday, right, Grant? And I said, Alistair, just ring up just to see how you're dealing, coping with accepting 2.21. He said, Peter, we feel unbelievable. He said, would you believe that every friend that rang us said, did you get above or below $2 million? They said, we got 2.21. So do you know what I mean? It's when you get one of those results, do yourself a favour and ring up about 2 days later just to follow up. It's amazing. You might be surprised at how much good feedback.
Justifying their decision.
Yeah. Guys, is there any questions? Lifestyle moving forward, that's very important, especially for older people. Just talking about the lifestyle moving forward. Tom and Jack saying, you're in this holding pattern at the moment. You want to get on with your life down the coast. What value do you put on that? Is it worth 1 or 2% of the value of your property in a market that looks like it's going to be softening? So using a word softening rather than falling, it's softening and looks like it's going to get worse before it gets better. Just future proofing, does that make sense? Got any other questions, guys? Aaron?
Speak up a bit, Aaron.
Yeah. Okay, so you want me to talk about dialogues that I'll have during the auction?
Yeah.
Okay, all right, give me a scenario.
You've got a reserve for 1.850.
Yep. Okay. Okay. So you got a reserve of 1.85, and you've got a higher offer of 1.65. And where's the interest been?
1.5.
Okay. All right. So I'll come into the settlement. So okay. Got some encouraging news. I've got an offer. Someone willing to sign a contract. So I've got all the terms and conditions, and their offer is 1.65.
I won't be selling for that.
Okay. I think the good thing to consider is that we're, from what I can gather, we're about $200,000 apart from a deal. Is that right?
Well, I've probably got a little bit of wriggle room.
Okay. So would it be fair to say we're about 10% away from a deal?
Probably, yeah.
Okay. All right. So what I want you to consider, I'm going to do what I can to try and get these people to increase their offer.
Well, I have to move up a fair bit. We're not interested.
Yeah. Okay. And look, I realise that you're saying that you don't want to sell below 1.85, but why don't you just entertain the idea of being able to move on with your life, what value you put on that, and just whether there might be something.
The other mob told me it's worth 1.9.
Yeah. Well, look, what they say and what they do can be different things, and I understand that. Is this making sense, Aaron? So I'm trying to let them own the decision. I'm saying,
unless the second number's an 8, I'm not doing a deal.
Okay. So you're saying to me, unless it's 1.8, so what you're saying to me is, if they say to me our best offer and final is 1.72, you're not interested?
Do you have an offer of 1.72?
Not at the moment. I'm going to try and go out and get it. I just want to know what to say if that's what their response is.
Well, I'll leave that to you. That's your job. You're earning the big fees.
Yeah. Aaron, you're the buyer. Okay, look, the owner's fairly rigid, and I will then show them the reserve, or what the number is. Say the reserve is 185 and he said that he'll take 1.8. I'll get him to initial it. And what I will say is, Aaron, how close to this number can you get? And the number there is...
What are you showing them, Peter?
I'm showing them what your revised reserve is, so I'm getting him to sign it at 1.8. I'm saying, how close to this number can you get? I don't say, this is what the owner wants or anything like that, I say, how close to that number can you get? Why do I do that? I'm not talking to them about this is what the owner wants. I said, how close to this number can you get, which is all about owning the decision, Aaron? And they're then able to say, no, I can't get close to that. I say, okay, but how close to it can you get? And what are you going to say? I've just shown you 1.8, you're at 1.65, what are you going to tell me? Let's role play. Yeah, he might be dreaming, but it's nice dreams. And I think the thing to say to you is that the closer you can get to that, the more likely you can realise your dream of owning this home. What would you like to do? Okay, how close to it are you going? Okay, 1.7.
Auctioneer's voice.
1.7. Okay, so you're saying if he says to me, I want 1.75, you're not interested. Is that right? Okay, let's see how we go. Mark, good news. I've got the owner, I've got the buyer outside. He's advised how much he likes your home and how they'd like to realise that dream of ownership, and he's told me that he'll go to 1.7.
Well, good on me. Won't be owning my joint.
Well, he may not be owning it yet. What are you thinking? I'm thinking alternate careers.
Well, in my experience, Peter, if you're walking alongside a creek and you want to get to the other side, you wait for the gaps until the creek's quite narrow because you don't want to get your feet wet, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So at the moment, I've got about 6 strides to get over there, and I've got new shoes, and I don't want to get my feet wet. So I'm only going to cross the creek when the gap's nice and narrow down there, and I guess what, I can just jump over. So you're going to have to get your guy up, way up, close to 1.8.
Okay, all right. All right, so really what we're talking about is we're talking about 1/17 of the price, is that
Well,
right?
you should know the percentage. Okay. That's 5.85%.
Yeah, yes, okay.
About my fee.
Why do I need to know it when you do? Right, okay. Aaron, great news. We're just under 6% away from a deal here. You're at 1.7, he's at 1.8. What are you thinking? Okay, right, then I'll come. Okay, and if he's at 1.76, you're saying no deal, no go, that 1.75's it? Capped at 1.75. Okay, right, let's see how we go. So we'll continue on and do that. Does that sort of make sense? And then I'll come back and Mark say, great news. You've got the opportunity here now to realise the future.
We haven't told anybody, but that was always our very bottom price.
Right.
Funny that. But I do want you to have one more go at him, because in my creek analogy,
yes,
if he's only 10 to 15 grand away, he might find a little bit of money in the back checkout.
Okay.
And I'd rather have the last 10 grand in my pocket than in his.
Okay, and I'm fine with that, but I just want to make sure, if he says, no, Peter, I've given it my best, I'm not going a cent more, I'm withdrawing my offer, you're comfortable with the fact that you've made that decision?
No.
Right. So I think we need... Okay, what am I doing? I'm just making sure there's ownership. The number of times people said, oh, if they're serious, I'll go another 10 or 15,000. And I really appreciate your example here, Aaron. Say, if they're serious, I'll go another 10 or 15,000. I said, well, that's fine as long as you're comfortable with owning the decision if they choose to withdraw that interest. Okay, I always make sure everyone owns the decision. Does that make sense?
Look, my perception of it is that you have to have 2 stories going. You've got to have a story going with the seller, and you've got a story going with the purchaser. And the problem is when the agents want to get involved in those conversations, keep them the fuck right out of it.
And
your conversation and your story is evolving if you are having a discussion.
One thing that I would say that's really important in those negotiations is time, because quite often if you are in an office and you're going in rooms, or even if you're in the house, that agent does want to get in there, and also sometimes the managers, and they think that they're doing a service by staying with the vendor, but actually the vendor and the buyer both need time. It's a big decision them, and if they've got someone in their ear standing there talking to them the whole time while you're out talking to the other, say you're out talking to the buyer and they're talking to the vendor, it's like they don't have a minute to think. So I really think it's important to, and I often say to the agent, come with me and we're out, like let's get out of here. And when we've got them on the phone, I say put it on mute and leave it on mute. Because the worst thing is talking past the close and that you leave the phone with the agent while you go talk to the buyer or the vendor, and they're like, oh yes, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, no, let them think. They need time to think.
Well, Peter, I don't even mind if they stay with the one party. Just don't come to both parties.
Yeah.
This extra person, stay with one.
They're actually a lifeboat. They can quite often be a lifeboat for the vendor or the purchaser. But I told you, well, no, you haven't told me, but they've told the agent. Leave them out of them.
I think the main thing is people want to feel that they're in control and that they're owning the decision. And if you facilitate that by letting them own the decision. I'll give you an example. I'd had some buyers coming to an auction. I had 2 Apex buyers and they said, Peter, what do you really think this is going to go for? And I said, I think the value's in the mid-2s. But I said, I think if you want to be the new owner, you've got to be comfortable with expecting somewhere between 2.3 and 2.4. Okay? That's what I said to them. So the auction, I had 5 registered bidders, and the bidding, they were the highest bidder at $2 million. Everyone else said they're out, right? I went up to them, and I had a reserve of 2.35. And I just said, Aisha, this is the reserve. At this number, you can be the new owner. And they looked at it, and they said, isn't that funny? That's the most we're prepared to go. So I moved them $350,000 just through the planning. So anyone who was there thought I was a magician getting them up 350, but it was just the planning that I'd done beforehand. I'm saying have real conversations with the people relative to the conversations that you've had. Does that make sense? Try and get to know them and build that rapport. You can't rely on it all unfolding on auction day.
Peter, Gordon and I got a report of the surroundings and how we've been cleaned up where we were.
Yes.
The first thing that the auctioneer or the manager who's negotiating does is go to the purchaser in the first instance to get them up before going to the vendor. What's your opinion on who to go to first?
I would always go to the buyer first.
Go to the buyer first and move them up.
Yes. Well, hang on.
No, I'm the exact opposite, and I was bidding in an auction in Bailey's auction room one day, and the auctioneer who was calling it is sitting in this room right now. And she called the auction, and I bid, and I was the highest bidder, and she came over to me and said, oh, well, you're not going to buy it for that. And I said, excuse me, go and ask the owner what they think of my offer.
You were much nicer than that.
Yeah, that's correct. I was. But the point was that the auctioneer did not know the reaction to what had occurred at their auction, which was a bid at X dollars. Right? And as the buyer, I wanted to know whether she had gone to represent my offer to the seller to see whether they would take it or not, whether they were prepared to adjust their reserve. And it was fine. And she told off and then came back and told me the exact same story again. But for me as a buyer, I wanted to know what the reaction was. And as a buyer, that's why I want to deal with the auctioneer in those circumstances. I don't want to deal with the agent and the manager. I want breaking news. Breaking news is what I'm after. Fox News.
Okay, can I now have a right of reply, please? Okay.
Fox News, I report, you decide.
That's right, Fox News.
Ryan, but I want to qualify and say, I actually, as the auctioneer, short of the reserve, I actually go and see the seller first and say...
Hang on a minute, you just said that he's...
How about if you let me finish? That's sometimes one of the things. I say, so with the negotiation, I deal with the buyer first, but I will say to the seller, you're right, I'll say, Mark, I'm just going to go out and speak to the owner, to the buyer, and just see what we can do. So just consider what you're thinking with regard to things.
But I just need confirmation that this figure is not palatable to you. Right? Can the owner change their mind if they want to?
They can, but I'm just making the point that
but can
they can. But hang on,
Well, give them a chance to in the first instance. when they just, as you think they're going to do, say, you know it's not for sale at that level, that's fine. I have to ask, because every time I've got a cash offer, if you accept it, the deal can be done.
So when we,
is it relative to how
hang
far
on.
away you are?
No!
Okay.
Hang on, wait a second.
Can I please have a right of reply? Is that okay? Okay. So let me say, first of all, not every buyer I meet is as belligerent as some. Some. And I tend to know where the owners are at quite well. I tend to know what the agents have told me quite well. In fact, I'm probably one of the auctioneers that asks the most questions of my agents because they get really fucking annoyed with it when I do. But no, seriously, look, and sometimes you do meet people who want that, right? But I still think that the act of going to the buyer sends a message to the buyer, and that is, I'm here to get more money for the vendor, I'm not here to talk the vendor's price down. It's a little bit of a power balance why I make that choice, and I know some others do as well. But at the same time, you have to use your empathy. You do have to be responsive to the situation. So when you have someone who says, no, go and talk to the vendor, I've given you my offer, that's okay. I'm very willing to work with that, and then you do. And then you do go back and tell the same story because I'm just confirming what I already knew, given that I know my agent and vendor and what they've said. Yep. So, you know, and that's why I approach it the way I approach it. The exception I make, I think sometimes I will go and speak to the vendor if the bidding is over the reserve.
Why not?
Just saying.
Hang on a minute, I want to get Karen Atwood's response, because you're a buyer's agent. Which do you prefer? Speak up, please. Say again.
Go to the party who needs it the most first.
Right.
So whether it's a buyer or a seller, you need to know
A result.
who needs the result the most. Who's the most motivated? Who is the most motivated out of those two parties go there first?
Right.
Great line.
How do you know that though, necessarily?
You don't tend to.
You need to know that because you're not really competing against other buyers, you're competing against the agent's ego and the vendor expectation. And both those things relate to the agent.
Right. Jordan?
Yeah, so on the few, those who know how Ryan and I operate, it's obviously we admit the step that's volume we've got, but on the occasions that I get to have those conversations, it's always the buyer first, because I have to be seen by my sellers, in my opinion, to actually be doing the best by them and asking for more.
Yes.
So the conversation always starts with appreciating yourself in the legal position, and the reason we're having a conversation at this level as opposed to closing in traditional parties is because there is a gap, but we don't believe it's insurmountable.
Yep.
I do need you to put something further forward that I can take to my sellers and see if I can get them to
Yeah, no, that's
Very
fine.
tough.
But you have run the auction, you've had some bids, and there's the circumstances that have emerged at a level which is below. I think to gain empathy with the purchaser, you at least go and give a token representation to the seller. I'm working with you to try and help you get this property, is what the buyer thinks. I don't have a problem with it, but I understand it. I mean, look, for the first time in my life I'm going and doing bulk auctions down in Hamilton. I am instigating every single negotiation where we're having to adjourn it. I'm not always concluding them. I'm leaving it where I have to press on to others. But I am instigating them all, and I never veer off that line of, thank you for your bid, sir. It's below my reserve. I'm going to have to take an instruction from my owner. Are you okay to wait there for a moment, please? They're all nodding away, you know, and off I go. And boom, I'm back to them in 90 seconds, and we get on with it. But it's that token step to support their bid, which is cash, of course.
Yeah.
So I think
to finish my question.
Good.
In a competition, if we were to go to buyer or seller first, it wouldn't really matter so long as the way we handle it.
Where's there more points?
Great question. Yeah. Lisa, have you got an opinion on this?
I think it would be We're
case
more
specific.
interested in the words you use with each of them.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, because we don't let you do that in silence. Has to be done audibly.
Yeah.
Clarence, where are you with on this?
You're both right. You're right in the sense that the buyer wants an answer from the vendor.
Yes.
But I still think the first conversation is with the buyer. My conversation is, Mr. Buyer, I really appreciate the offer you made. In a moment, I'm going to go and talk to the seller and see what they think of your offer. In all likelihood, I'm going to come and ask you for an increase in a moment's time, so I want you to have a think about what more you might be able to try and get it done today.
Perfect.
I then go into the vendor, I say, Mr. and Mrs. Vendor, we've got 1.65 on the floor. I don't want a decision from you at this point. I'm going to go out and try and get you some more money.
How many times you have gone back and forth? You haven't done anything yet.
No, but I agree entirely with this.
And you watch their face go, oh, I like him, yeah, get out there and get me some more money, because you're not just asking them for a decision at the first offer or wherever it's stopped, right? You're going to do some work for them. So when you do ask them for a decision, you're setting it up in a better way to get a decision from that person. Then you talk back to the buyer and say, as I suspected, we're not quite where we need to be just yet. What can we throw at this to try and get it done? Go and take them an increase.
Yep.
And then, and by the way, a little tweak on your process, I would actually show them the full reserve first, not the adjusted reserve first. I would ask him for the 1.85, and then I would go back in and he would tell me, yeah, okay, look at 1.8, we let it go.
Yes.
I've already taken him an increased offer from this guy by that time, and then I come back and say, look, great news, you've offered me 1.7, they've come down to 1.8, so you've come up 50, they've come down 50. Can you give me another increase? I've got a process that I work to, which is reward an increase with an increase. It's like giving a dog a schmacko, right? When the buyer does something good, give them a schmacko. What's the schmacko? The schmacko is a decrease in the asking price. So don't give away your decrease until they give you the increase.
Yeah.
Very good.
Can I just look there and agree entirely with that? The only thing that I have started to do, if I don't know the buyer or the seller, I will say, look, I just want to explain, you don't know me and I'm not expecting you to trust everything I say. I need to earn that trust, and that's just what I'm going to do. I'm about to go in and see the owner, just see what their position is. I can say at this stage that based on our instructions, they aren't willing to sell at this, but I want you to consider what you might go to. I'm going to get some instruction from them. So all I've found, Clarence, and I'm not saying people should do it, but I find, but just by breaking the ice by saying, look, we haven't met before, I respect that, I'm a stranger to you, but this is what I'm going to try and do, and try and win a level of trust, exposing weakness to reveal a strength. But I will say that I have found when you showing that reserve, even unaffected, the original reserve, it just has been so easy because you're actually not saying the number, they're reading it. And if you understand psychology, it's the fact that they are bringing in the number rather than you telling them, that it's actually a different experience. They're feeling that they've got a level of control in deciding how they react to that. Very important. Make sense?
And your dialogue around, the inevitable answer is no, I won't pay it. And okay, either what will you pay or how close to that figure can you get is exactly where you're going.
Yeah. Have you guys had enough?
Pretty much. Yeah.
I
Are you going to come up and have a yarn, or do you want to take some questions, or how are you feeling?
Sure. Happy to. I think though, like, even just to close this off, the thing is there isn't a one size fits all. There's also our styles. There's also the amount of interaction we've had. Peter, you're talking on the basis that you're working as an agent with these people, and then you're the auctioneer as well. So you have a lot more interaction with both the buyers and the sellers. There'll be auctioneers in the room who have never met either. There'll be auctioneers in the room who maybe have a half an hour with their vendors, and then they don't meet the buyers until they're putting their hand up in the auction. So there's so much variety. And I think the moral of the story is be attuned, be in the moment, and work with what you can see. Have the empathy, and the word trust has been thrown around. That's that's undeniably the fundamental of it all. Is to be able to build that trust in a very, very quick moment. For me personally, I tend to have most of my auctions, I have half an hour to build trust and rapport with my vendors, and it's often on the day of auction. That's it. So and that is why I want to get right into the heads of the agents around what is the information they can give me, and then we together build what's needing to happen, and I guide that through. I think that's really, at the end of the day, it's what's right in the moment.
I think it's essential too, really, to talk to an owner before you auction their property. I realise it's not always possible, but I just find that I don't do a lot of auctions because I'm mainly an agent, but when I do, I always like to meet the owner before auction day, preferably just sit down with them, just so they know I'm not, some smooth talking auctioneer, and that I'm trying to help them and that I'm their advocate, not their adversary.
Yeah, I do a midway meeting at 2.5 week point, either go and view that property, because I go and view every property I auction, and I meet with the vendor at that point and just have a chat to them and set them up for their reserve set meeting, tell them what they can expect of that, and meet them there and start building rapport a week out from the auction. So
there's no doubt that everyone's got their styles, and that's what makes this whole gig so invigorating to me. There isn't one way to skin a cat, and it's I love the fact that we've all got strong opinions, but you can take little nuggets today, take them away and use them. They're very powerful, and given the right circumstances. Yes, Andy?
Since you all think alike on every point, which is great, how would you set reserves? Are you wanting to do it? The salespeople can sometimes be very capable. The manager, what do you see as the best scenario?
Well, I've tried for 40 years to get the reserve where I want, and I've failed every single time. So now I do my Colombo close or I leave.
So you're on your own when you reserve?
Man, I don't care. You set the reserve, and you've had all the feedback and the opinion from the agents and a recommendation. You set the reserve and I go and call the auction.
So you're saying you're in the meeting though?
When I meet the owner or whenever it is, even if it's half an hour beforehand, and they give me the reserve and I shut up and they go, well, what do you think? And I said, no, I told you, you set the reserve and I leave. You want my opinion, you've got no hope. But I told you I wasn't going to comment on it, right? But you asked.
So they're setting their number based on feedback from the agent?
Well, they're giving it on whatever they're giving it on, right? If they wanted it, I've got a reserve, right? They've given me a reserve. I can't sell it for any less than that. I'm going to have to adjourn them and have a chat with them. And that's where the old Colombo close goes. Right, take reserve, leave. Either way.
Yeah. I want to say, so for me, I will say to people, look, where you set the reserve isn't as important as what decisions you're willing to make on auction day. You've said to me that you want to set a reserve at 185. The agent has told me all the interest has been around 160, 165. I think you've got to decide in a very relaxed mindset on auction day, what if the bidding pulls up at 1.6? What if the bidding pulls up at 165? What if up until 1.8? Obviously the closer to 1.8 the easier the decision, but I don't want you making decisions under pressure, leaving it to the last moment. And honestly, that's probably the most significant thing, because when I analyse why people haven't liked the auction experience, it's because they haven't been told that at the pre-auction meeting. They've said, Lisa, I know we said we were going to get 1.8, but the offer is 1.65. What do you want to do? I think you should take it. And they're saying, hang on, there's 150 grand that we were giving to our kids or something like that. So I think that's the most powerful thing to say.
Well, it's counterintuitive, Andy. Yeah. The more buyers you've got, the lower the reserve should be. It's impossible for it to sell cheap.
Yeah.
Someone's going to keep bidding if it's still cheap. All right, it's counterintuitive. The more interest, the more sharp the reserve, the sharper the reserve needs to be. You've only got one buyer, stick the reserve up there so you can do the clearance kick and tell them that the expectations are still up there at 2 million.
When one thing was to buy, or the vendors really promoted like that, because they don't understand, we've got 4 or 5 bidders. It's like, actually, it's actually really important to talk about what it is, because we're bidding the last one was pause it.
Well, we want it announced on the market being while there's still 2 or more people bidding. Correct. Because that's when they do get right to the bottom of their...
And that's when you need to know, before you go into a reserve meeting, what is actually going on from the agent. But like for me, and I'm not sure if I've got the question right or wrong, I think the question is whether or not we just let the agent or a manager set it and they hand us the piece of paper, or whether we are involved face-to-face with vendors. So for me personally, that's my moment of getting to know the vendor, building trust, building rapport. I need half an hour for that. 25 minutes, half an hour. And that is incredibly important to me. In fact, I really don't like it when I come across agents who just want to do it themselves. And thankfully I don't have anybody like that. So the other aspect, and I don't know if this is useful, they talk about, or vendors often talk to us about, the feedback, and people always hold something back, and I'd never tell the agent the truth. Has anyone ever heard that?
Once or twice.
So I quite like using an analogy called, well, look, I meet three kinds of buyers, right? I meet the buyers who tell us the truth, and what they say is what they bid on the day. We meet buyers who give us quite an emotional amount when they see the property, and then especially in this market, when they're starting to do their numbers, they become more conservative and they probably saw something else last weekend. And then we meet the buyers who either deliberately or unknowingly hold a little bit back. And we meet them too. We just don't know which ones are going to show up for you on the day. And that's the test of the auction. So where you set your reserve becomes important. But actually the reserve's not the target for me. The target's the most I can get for you. So like using that kind of language for me builds the rapport, builds the trust. They know that I'm going to go for every last dollar. And sometimes that makes you excited, and sometimes we have to have another conversation. And if we do get the high reserve, I say, look, I don't argue a reserve. You're in control of the pen, right? I never argue a reserve. That's your prerogative. It's your home. But respectfully, look, I need to say to you, if I didn't have this conversation, I'm stuffing it up. Respectfully, I would ask you to consider very carefully what your decision's going to be, because the likelihood is this is where you'll need to make one, and that's based on the feedback. So it's that kind of trust-based dialogue and empathy, but still letting them know you're going to shoot for the best for them.
I think a big thing to say is a priming position for all of this.
Priming position.
Yeah. Is that, or to understand conversation, is that happiness and most things are based on expectations. And if you go in with a higher praise price, that's probably the worst foundation to start a relationship on. Right? And I'm not saying that we all need to underprice or anything like that. I'm just making the point. It's all relative to expectations. And you're coming back to your point, I don't like to, these aren't always enjoyable conversations, and I'll commonly say to people, look, I'm a stranger who's just come into your house. I don't believe I've earned your respect or trust to be telling you what your home's worth, but I'm very happy to share decisions share opinions based on what I've been told. And it's, I'm not enjoying this conversation. You've said you want 1.5, all the interest's been in the 1.2s. That's confronting. But I'd prefer you to confront it now than during the auction, when I'm giving you 3 minutes to make a decision on whether a person stays in your backyard or goes elsewhere to bid on another property. And that's real, right? It's being authentic. Does that make sense? I think if you can do that.
Something that I've observed recently, just particularly sort of the middle up here, where prices have come down a little bit. Agents who have actually appraised, done their best, they're not over or under, they're trying to get it right. But the dynamic of what they're doing is they're actually pricing what the property could have sold for 2 months ago, rather than predicting what it's going to sell.
Rear vision mirror versus windscreen.
I'm encouraging the agents, and I'm even saying this to the sellers, if they say that they're remarking about the appraisal, I'll say, hey, I appreciate that, and that probably would have been a fair indication of what 2 months ago.
Yeah.
We've got 4 bidders today who want to buy it, and the guy we're talking to is going to beat 3 other people. So I think we have to be a bit careful about throwing this offer out into the bathwater. We need to engage in good faith if you want to move forward.
I think too, in support of that, Sabina's talking about empathy, which is obviously paramount, but it's also just about the what ifs and future planning, and saying, if we pass the property in, how are things looking for your planning going forward? And that's where they might say, well, we actually need this for a sale. So, Travis,
just following on from Andy and Sabina, I feel if you put yourself in the vendor's shoes. You're about to help them dispose of what's usually their biggest asset, and at the very least you should be having a conversation with them so they can be comfortable with you. A few other things, I often find a really good telltale if they ask you, what do you think of that? They know it's too high. And the other thing is I put myself in the same team with them. I just say, look, at 1.8 we might be a little bit optimistic or ambitious given the feedback's at 1.6. But look, if we're at 1.5, we'll be the first to tell you, let's pass it in because we can do better. What I would say is the more north of 1.6 we are, the less convinced I am that we may necessarily do better post-auction. And if we're not accepting, for example, something in the 1.7s, it would be because that we're very, very comfortable we can do better post, and I wouldn't be comfortable telling you that.
So I just want to say this. Only 2 weeks ago, actually a week and a half ago, I was in a meeting. The people said, "What do you think?" I said, I actually don't think I've earned the right to share my opinion when I've been a stranger up until 5 minutes ago. And then 10 minutes later, they said, "Well, what do you really think?" And I actually answered it, and they took it all on board. So I'm saying, sometimes expose a weakness to reveal a strength.
Can I just say something about, at the appraisal point with salespeople, what I train salespeople with now, is a line that I used to use when I was a salesperson, was when you've got a difference in pricing, they got a couple of appraisals, was I used to say that, look, we don't necessarily even need to agree on what your home is worth. My skill base is not that of a valuer. My skill base is around negotiation and marketing, and what's more important than the price is the marketing strategy that we utilise to actually extract and get the market to interact with your property. And so that led me straight down to a low price marketing strategy of an auction, and then getting competition and emotion involved to drive the price to where they would like it. I mean, you still got to put a price in it, but that's statistical data that doesn't take into account emotion. You can't quantify value on emotion, so you've got to actually dismiss it at the appraisal.
Well, you've been employed to market and negotiate the sales, what you've been employed to do.
Yep.
Your opinions matter. Look, I think it's very timely that we bring it to a head now. It's been invigorating again, thanks Sabina, to have Peter here and to use his dialogues and his deep understanding of somebody who's not only an auctioneer but a salesperson, and that covers that wider sphere to empower you to take back to your teams, and use those words if you can. They're very, very strong and potent, and can be the trigger for plenty of success. And I've learned a lot from Peter over the years, and I still use his words, and we discuss things at length about what might be better alternatives, and we've worked well together as a team. Sabina, yep.
There's one other line I'd like to share. Some of you may have heard it before, and that is when the vendor sets the reserve and it's not their bottom line. In fact, I often say to vendors, I really don't want to know your bottom line, Richard, and I hope I never have to ask you, because I'm here to get you the best, but I want you to be prepared with that figure when we hit auction, because the decision you make will need to be quick. But I hope I never have to come and ask you.
Yeah, really good.
That's brilliant.
All right, so if we just give Peter a great round of applause. All right, so the rest of the day